My stepmother rode a motorcycle. She actually hung around with folks who rode motorcycles, and I know a lot of people who ride motorcycles that are nice people, but these were not so nice people. And my father needed someone to watch his kids, so he married her. And at 16 years old, she was just 10 years older than I, and 6 years older than my oldest brother. And so we had a dysfunctional family. We started with one and ended with one. And I graduated at 18, and the night I graduated, my father said, "I promised your mother when she passed away that I would take care of you kids until you were raised. My sentence is over." And that, as bad as that sounds, that took me from the little girl I was inside to the girl that I needed to be to get out on my own, marry, have my own family, be stronger than I was living in that household. And I wasted no time, let me tell you. I took college courses in high school, and I fell away from that course, and I graduated, of course, but I got married right out of high school and had my beautiful daughter, Vicki, the following year. And I loved being married. It ended in divorce, however, probably because of my dysfunctional background. Who can say amen to that? We take all that mess into the lives we try to build, and until we overcome things, we carry that with us from person to person, be it boyfriend to boyfriend or husband to husband, whatever. It was a very dysfunctional time in my life, and following my divorce, I decided I wanted to go to school. And at 32 years old, I went to college. And I met the man who 10 years later was to become my husband. He was my poetry professor at Otterbein College. Who knows Otterbein College? Is anyone here a graduate from Otterbein?
My daughter is.
Is she? Anyone else? I'm sorry, I don't mean to ignore you back here. I'll turn a little bit more.
We could pull our chairs up.
When I met my husband, I first saw him in the parking lot at Otterbein, and I was getting out of my vehicle and he was getting out of his. And I saw him carrying a briefcase, and he had this wild Einstein hair, white hair, sticking up in a swirl on top here. And I took a good look at him, and I thought, oh, goodness, I hope that's not the poetry professor. And guess what? When we got into class, there he was. I took a better look at him, still had the Einstein hair, and one unironed sleeve on a short sleeve white shirt. And I thought, that man needs a good woman. I didn't know that 10 years hence I would be that woman. He gave me a B-. And if you're a writer and a poet, you don't want a B-. I had a 4-point average at Otterbein at the time, and I thought, he's going to screw this up for me. So I asked him, would you reconsider? And he said, sure, write the poem over. Well, I changed maybe one word in it, just to say. I changed it. And I think he upgraded it to a B after all. But there was that tension between us during the course. I ended up getting an A in the course overall, so that was cool. But we weren't getting along too well. I mean, this wasn't my idea of a cool person, you know, the Einstein hair, the unironed sleeve, and he would just kind of stand up and talk, you know. I'm sorry, Vicki. You're doing this to me again, aren't you? This is for blackmail purposes, isn't it? My husband laughs about all of this, by the way. I'm not being negative about it. It's just the absolute truth. And he's the professorial type, and I love him to death. But anyway, after I finished that course, I moved on. I was about 100 miles away from the college area, and Norm was writing to me telling he would send Christmas cards. I thought this was really sweet because I was angry with him, still angry with him about that first B-. I sent the poem out, and it came in the top 100 Editor's Choice Award for my sonnet with the bad metaphors, he called it. Editor's Choice Award, top 100 out of 12,000 around the globe. And so I had to brag a bit. I sent that to him, and he wrote back and he said, well, I just published a philosophy book. And I thought, well, there you go, Einstein. Over 10 years we exchanged Christmas cards, and I published this and I published that. And what it came down to 10 years later is, I'm going to be in Columbus, and he said, stop in and see me. And I thought, what will we talk about? My B- and the bad metaphor. I didn't want to refresh that. But he said, well, we'll go out to dinner or something. So the first night, I'm in my hotel room, and he calls and he says, well, let's go out to a movie. We saw Forrest Gump. Bad first choice for a movie. You've seen Forrest Gump? There weren't some healthy scenes in that, or they're very healthy scenes. And so there was some hand-wringing during that movie. And when he took me back to the hotel room, he said at the door, he says, would you like to come to my house for dinner tomorrow night? And I thought, whoa, this is a little strange. Why would I want to come to his house? I found out he was a Methodist minister, and I only knew this by looking in the phone book to call him at his house the next night. He's a Methodist minister. And I thought, no, this is pretty progressive for a Methodist minister. I didn't know because I had no background. I wasn't raised to be religious. We didn't go to church. I had a little Gideon's Bible that was given to me in 6th grade, and I leaned on that during my childhood. That's about the bulk of it. And so Norm said, come for dinner. I went to dinner at his house. He welcomed me at the door with an apron on. How many of you ladies have had your husband or boyfriend come to you with an apron on? Other than the barbecue. Just an apron?
That's awesome.
You have some wild ones with you. What number was that? Passion? Yeah, keep the passion going. Yes, I love it. I love it. No, he was fully clothed, an iron shirt, apron. Most men don't wear aprons unless they're barbecuing, but he had an apron on. And I thought, this is interesting. He's cooking his own dinner, and it smelled fabulous in that kitchen. I went in the kitchen, and he says, no, you're going into the living room. And when I walked into the living room, the entire living room was encircled with rows of books on shelves. And I love books. I love reading. I love poetry, novels, how-tos. It doesn't matter. I love it all. And he said, sit down in this high-back chair here, and I'm going to get you a poetry book. I was in absolute heaven. Would any of you be in heaven? If you had a man come to you in an apron and hand you a poetry book and say, sit down and make him dance?
Yeah.
I was reading poetry, and all of a sudden I heard the Mills Brothers chime in the background. He put on Mills Brothers. Who likes Mills Brothers in here? Aren't they wonderful? I'm listening to that and reading the poetry and just enjoying the ambiance of the room and the moment. And I'm thinking, I've died and gone to heaven. I just don't realize that I died. And he came into the room and he said, dinner's ready. And I said, I've got to marry this man. It was a magical moment for me. And he led me to the table and he says, pulls the chair out and says, "Please be seated," and he lights a candle and he has flowers and this beautiful chicken dinner. And I said, "Oh, look at that beautiful chicken. Who made that chicken dinner?" And he said, "Somebody made the chicken." And I said, "Well, what about the cranberry sauce? That looks delicious. Who made that cranberry sauce?" He said, "Somebody made the cranberry sauce." I said, "How about this nice little corn loaf over here? Who made that cornbread loaf?" And he said, "Somebody made the cornbread." And I said, "How about this salad? The salad, oh, it looks delicious." And he said, "I made the salad." Who do you think made that dinner?
Boston Market.
You must eat at Boston Market. In one of my previous talks about 7 days and my getting together with my husband, which is the magical relationship, manifesting your magical relationship, I talked about this and I lost my train of thought. Oh, I asked the audience who thought where this meal came from, and they said Kentucky Fried Chicken. Well, that's close, but it's Boston Market. I didn't know. I was 100 miles away. So, yeah. Anyway, I sat down, I ate the dinner, and following the dinner, we talked and had tea. We had tea for 3 or 4 hours. Tea, and cinnamon buns. Who knows what cinnamon buns do to you? Huh? Who eats cinnamon buns in here? What do they do to you? Passion. Oh. Anyway, I knew I was in love when I left that house, and I was so thrilled to have taken part in that experience. We ended up dating off and on, and I was 100 miles away. It was very difficult getting together, but we worked it out. We wrote back and forth and continued to write, and he sent me some beautiful music that he played on the piano at home. He recorded it for me, and I love music as well. So over a period of about a year, we fell deeply in love, and we ended up getting married 2 years later. So we've been friends for 26 years and married 16 of those, and Einstein still wears his hair like this. How many of you have your relationship that's magical? Of course you do, Martha. Would anyone like to share anything about how they found their magical relationship?
Well, I've known my husband since I was in 6th grade. His mother was my homeroom teacher.
Fabulous. Fabulous. That's a wonderful story. So far back.
Yeah.
I had crushes in grade school. We all had those little crushes on those boys who had the penny loafers with the little pennies in them. Yeah. Most of us want that business or that something that completes our lives. And it sounds like most of you have already arrived there, but you can help others you know get there by sharing your ideas with them and mentoring them. P.E.O. is the perfect organization for doing that. My husband and I wanted a B&B after we married. We looked for 2 years trying to find the perfect location for a B&B. And we finally found one in Ohio, in Mount Vernon. We were looking for a federal-style 2-story with columns. We were driving by. We were discouraged because we didn't find that perfect place we wanted. But don't ever give up hope. We held that out. We were driving past down State Route 13, and we saw this big house on the hill. And I said, "Oh my God, it's perfect." And it was. I craned my neck and I'm looking, and there's this gorgeous property there. It turned out to be the James McFarland house. Are you familiar with it?
I think we've been there.
It's hard to see because of the tree cover. It has a canopy of trees around it. You can see it very well from the air. It has a new standing seam roof on it that hasn't been painted yet, so it's really bright. right. Does anybody else in here fly or co-pilot? Do you?
Donna does.
Donna does? You're a wild thing, aren't you? I think you'll enjoy my book. We were going past the house, and I craned my neck, and I looked, and there were beautiful palms in the front of the house and in the back, and these gorgeous trees, and everything about it was perfect. And I said, I have to have that house. I set the intention. How many of you know that if you set an intention, it works out better for you?
Set a goal, for sure.
Set a goal, an intention. I intend to make this come true. There's power behind setting an intention, writing down your goals to make it happen. It's important to have a visual to look at. Anyway, we drove home, and I couldn't get the house off my mind. And I told my husband, we need to go back there and see if that house is for sale. For some reason, I wanted to see if that house was for sale. Who's ever had a divine connection where something keeps picking at you and says, go back and look, go back and look, go back and look? You have? Yes. We went back, and sure enough, there was a for sale sign in the driveway. We hadn't seen it. We'd already passed the driveway by the time I got the glimpse of the front of the house. So then I'm all excited. I know this is destiny. I'm going to work on this. I set my intention. We'll get this house. We went home. I got out the poster paper. My husband didn't want to look at the house that day, by the way. So when I went home, I got out my poster paper, and I drew the orchards that I wanted, the vineyard. I drew the house and the statuary gardens, beautiful wisteria tree bushes that I was going to plant. And my husband walked in, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm planning our B&B. And he said, we can't afford that. We can't afford it. And I just ignored him and went on and kept drawing the B&B. And he said, well, we're not going up there to see it again. Well, the next day, that night I had a dream. And in the dream, someone was stroking my hair. How many of you have had such a lucid dream that it seems like it's real? Anyone? Yes. I mean, you're in the dream, but you think you're not dreaming. I woke up from the dream, and I remembered when the hand was stroking my hair, there was a voice with it that said, if I could only get through to you, I could help you. If I could only get through to you, I could help you. Was it God? Was it Jesus? Was it a friend of mine who often visits me in my dream to help me? I didn't know. I wasn't sure. But as soon as I got out of bed, I remembered that dream. I knew it meant something. I knew something was going to turn out well that day. Phone rang. I ran downstairs in my pajamas, picked up the phone, and it's the realtor that I had called the day before. I had called the day before, and he said, why don't you come up and see the house today? And I said, my husband says we can't afford it. And he said, have you ever heard of creative financing? And I said, he's not going to go for that. And he said, no, talk to him. Have him call me. So when my husband got back home, he called the realtor, and the realtor, Bob Harrod. Who knows Bob Harrod? Isn't he a wonderful man? I just love Bob. Well, we went up to meet him at his office, and he talked to us about creative financing, and he took us to see the house, and we fell in love immediately. Absolutely just fell in love with the house. We ended up putting a bid on it, but there was already a contract on it. And the contract was, the stipulation of the contract was, you have to sell your own home. The first contractor had to sell her own home before she could purchase the second home. And so we had a week on our second contract. She had a week to sell her house. So we waited that week out, we sweated, worried, and at the end of the week, we waited 7 o'clock p.m. We were going to hear from the realtor, 7:30 rolls around, we've lost the house. That's what I'm saying to myself. Who in the final moments has ever done that? They've gotten negative and said, this isn't working. We've all done it, haven't we? To be truthful, we've all done it. My husband said, I'm going to call Bob or you're going to lose your mind. I'm dancing and skating across the wood flooring in the kitchen. Oh, we've lost it, we've lost it. He called Bob, and I watched my husband's face very carefully. And he just looked like Einstein again, that blank stare. And he said, oh, thank goodness, I thought I lost my tractor. Oh, no, they threw the tractor in. Now, can you see Einstein on an international tractor? Yep. Rolling through 5 acres in the backfield. And he's still doing that. We've had our B&B for about 14 years in Mount Vernon, and I've done talks just on the B&B. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. We have a sanctuary garden where Mr. Butterfly comes to sit on the angel, and that story was in Guidepost, Angels on Earth magazine. I've written for Guidepost, Angels on Earth magazine a few times. And that is the base. That's the location, the sacred place where I do not only my B&B business and welcome people from around the world. This is the place where I write. And it's very sacred to me, and it comes through in the writing. And of course, that's where Linda Moss came from. How many have seen the B&B? You've seen it? Passing? Just
My daughter and
passing?
I have been there, and she was on your website and has lost my daughter,
What is her name?
Amy Gilbert.
Amy? Oh, you're the ones who went into the loft and we took your picture. I remember you now. We took your picture near the books in the barn.
My daughter's picture.
Yes. And you had a picture of yourself in the front, near the column. I remember. Thank you for saying. Well, you know how special it is then. It's a beautiful, beautiful, sacred place. Gone over time a little, so I'm going to abbreviate this next section. I'm going to tell you just about. Am I going too far over time?
Well, no, I was asking the name of your place, I'm sorry.
Oh, the Chaney Manor Bed and Breakfast. I'm sorry. Yeah. For several months, I spent the first few months I spent creating the B&B and creating the grounds, and then I got into designing a book that some people call a cookbook. It's House Blessings. I don't know if any of you have it. You might have gotten it while you were there, House Blessings. And it talks about cottage living, and we don't do cottage living, but I just have those roots. That's where I came from a farm in the country. So I created that book, and then I went on to create several more. George Eliot Lives. That will be my next book out, and I'll be traveling to England next March with my husband, and we'll be going to Eliot country. Who likes George Eliot in here? Anyone? Yes, you would. I adore her. I think you'll like my book too. It's fascinating. But I wrote several books at the Manor. That's all part of the ambiance of being there. The books, we have probably 12,000 inside the house and in the book barn. I'm just going to give you a few things that happened to me that were really interesting. If you are familiar with synchronicity, you have those moments in your life where you say, 1, 2, 3 has happened, this is going to lead to 4. And so you follow that synchronous pattern. And those are examples, these are some examples from my own life. I wanted to write a book on forget the facelift. I went down to the breakfast table and I told my husband I'm going to write a book on facelift. He said, why? I said, I don't know. I'm getting older now. You know, I want to look a little younger. And I said, I want to do this in a natural way. I want to write about how not to have a facelift, maybe, how to make yourself look nice without a facelift. And so we went to the bookstore that day. We go to bookstores all the time. But that day, as soon as we entered the store, I went to the bargain section. Who does that? Everybody likes a bargain. So I went to the bargain section, and I saw this book right on top, and I looked, and it says, "Forget the facelift." And the universe, this is to tell you that the universe tells you what not to do, as well as what to do. I had just come up with that title that morning, "Forget the Facelift," and there it is in the junk pile, the bargain pile. A $2 book on top of the bargain clearance section. So that's one example. The second example, I was in a church bookstore. It's called the Linworth Bookstore, isn't it, Vicki?
Village.
Village Bookstore?
But it's in
Village.
Linworth.
In Linworth. And we just love that shop. It has a sacred aura about it. I was in there. I'm sorry?
It's an old church.
Yes, it is. It's an old church. And it feels like a church, too, when you're in there shopping. You just don't get away from that feeling. Anyway, I was looking for a George Eliot book, and I've had all the Dover editions I could stand. I just, not another Dover edition, please. And I was going through the shelf, and I'm thinking just one more book in order to finish, to get some references for my George Eliot Lives book. And this is a true story, George Eliot Lives. And I'm looking on the shelf, nothing. And I said, if someone could only bring one reference book in here on George Eliot, I would so much appreciate it. I looked at the shelf again just to be sure, and there was the reference book by Margarita Lasky. Margarita Lasky does a fabulous book if you can get your hands on it. It's from the UK. And I used that book to help me write George Eliot Lives. It's a beautiful story. I hope to have it out sometime next year. I'm going to England to write the afterword for it, but the book is completely written, already has the foreword and everything. But there it was. I asked for it, and it appeared on the shelf. The third one is going to really blow your mind. My husband and I are shopping another day in a bookstore, and my husband's ready to check out. We've been there for an hour, which is nothing for a bookstore. He's on his way out the door with his books, and I said, wait a minute. I'm going to look for Tintin books. Who knows who Tintin is? Yes? I collect the Tintin books for my grandson. And I was looking at the Tintin, or looking for the references at the desk, and the clerk says, well, I think we have one. Just wait. He's going down through the computer list, and he goes, we have one in the store.